The fluorescent lights in the service corridor hummed their familiar dirge as Ethan Cole pushed his cleaning cart toward the freight elevator. 3 years of this route had carved the path into muscle memory. Left at the maintenance closet, right past the break room where second-shift security guards microwaved their dinners. Straight through to the service bay, where industrial-grade mops stood sentinel in their wheeled buckets. The clock above the time punch station read 11:43, Thursday night bleeding into Friday morning. In 17 minutes, he would take the service elevator to the 40th floor and begin the routine that paid for groceries, kept the lights on in his apartment, and occasionally left enough in the account for Liam to get new sneakers when his feet outgrew the old ones. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his mother, brief as always. Liam ate all his dinner. Sleep by 8:30. Don't forget to pick up milk. He typed back a thumbs-up emoji, the only response he had energy for at this hour. His mother had moved in with them 2 years ago when her arthritis made living alone impractical. She watched Liam during these night shifts, a arrangement that worked until it didn't. Her hands shook more now. Her memory slipped on small details. Soon he would need to find other solutions, add more problems to the list he kept in the back of his mind. The elevator doors opened with a mechanical sigh. Ethan wheeled the cart inside and pressed 40. The ascent took 90 seconds, enough time to close his eyes and remember what Sarah's voice sounded like. 8 years, and the memory had started fraying at the edges. He could recall her laugh, but not the joke that caused it. Her hands on his face, but not the words she spoke while touching him. Some nights the forgetting felt like dying all over again. The 40th floor opened into a lobby of glass and chrome. Whitlock Industries had occupied this building for 2 decades. Each floor a monument to Aurora Whitlock's vision of technology integrated seamlessly into human life. Server farms hummed behind locked doors. Conference rooms stood empty, their walls still holding the ghosts of negotiations worth millions. Ethan had cleaned these floors long enough to recognize the patterns. Monday nights smelled of fresh flowers delivered to executive offices. Wednesday nights, security ran building-wide checks that delayed his schedule by 20 minutes. Friday nights belonged to silence so complete he could hear his own breathing echo off the windows. Tonight felt different. He couldn't name what tipped him off. Maybe the way the air conditioning cycled with unusual frequency. Maybe the faint scent of perfume lingering near the private elevator that led to the CEO's suite. Maybe instinct honed by years of working alone in spaces designed for people who never noticed him. Ethan began his routine. Empty the trash bins, vacuum the carpeted sections, mop the marble near the elevator banks, wipe down the glass conference table in the corner office, polish the brass fixtures in the executive bathroom. His hands moved through the work while his mind wandered to Saturday morning. Liam had a soccer game at 10. The boy had been practicing his kicks in the narrow hallway of their apartment, sending a foam ball ricocheting off walls while Ethan made dinner. The kid had Sarah's coordination, her natural grace. Watching him move sometimes hurt in ways Ethan couldn't explain to anyone. The sound came at 12:07 exactly. He would remember the time because he had just checked his watch, calculating how long before he could move to the 39th floor. A thud from somewhere above, muffled but wrong, the kind of sound that shouldn't exist in empty buildings at midnight. Ethan's first instinct was to ignore it. Not his floor, not his problem. 3 years had taught him the boundaries. Stay in designated areas. Don't touch personal items. Don't ask questions about conversations overheard or documents glimpsed. But the sound repeated, heavier this time, desperate. His feet moved before his brain caught up. The mop handle clattered against the wall as he abandoned it. The private elevator required a key card he didn't have. He took the stairs instead, emergency exit doors that opened with a push bar and a shriek of hinges that needed oil. 41 floors up, the CEO's private domain. The stairwell spat him into a corridor he had never seen. Darker than the floors below. Floor-to-ceiling windows on one side showed Chicago sprawling into the distance, a carpet of lights that ended at the lake's black edge. On the other side, a single door. Mahogany and glass. A nameplate in brushed steel, Aurora Whitlock, Chief Executive Officer. Through the glass he saw her. Aurora Whitlock lay crumpled on the marble floor of her office, one arm stretched toward the massive desk that dominated the space, the other folded beneath her body at an angle that made Ethan's chest tighten. Her breath came in short gasps, visible in the room's cold air. Her fingers scraped weakly at the floor's polished surface as if trying to pull herself forward. Ethan shoved through the door. The office smelled of coffee gone cold and expensive perfume mixed with something sharper. Sweat. Fear. He knelt beside her and carefully lifted her shoulders. She weighed less than he expected. Her head lolled against his arm. Her eyes opened halfway unfocused and glassy. The words that came from her lips were barely audible. "Please don't let them take my son." Then she was unconscious. Ethan's training kicked in. Not medical training, he had none, but practical knowledge earned from 8 years of solo parenting. Check breathing, check pulse, look for obvious injury. Her breathing steadied slightly once her airway opened. Her pulse felt rapid but strong. No blood, no visible trauma. Her skin was cold despite the building's climate control. He pulled his phone and dialed 911. Bum. The operator's voice crackled through professional and distant. He gave the address, the floor, the situation. The operator asked if he knew what substances might be involved. Ethan's eyes tracked to the desk. A prescription bottle lay on its side near the edge. He moved closer without letting go of Aurora. The label read familiar medications, sleep aids, nothing street. He told the operator what he saw. She asked him to stay on the line. He did, counting seconds until he heard sirens in the distance. Aurora's eyes fluttered again. This time they found his face. Recognition flickered in their depths, confusion mixed with something darker. Her lips moved. "Who are you?" He kept his voice steady, the tone he used when Liam woke from nightmares. "You collapsed. Help is coming. Try not to move." She tried anyway, pushing weakly against his supporting arm. "My son, where's Oliver?" "I don't know who Oliver is, but you're safe right now." Her eyes closed. Her body went slack again. Ethan stayed exactly where he was until the paramedics arrived. 17 hours earlier, Aurora Whitlock had stood in front of her bathroom mirror and counted the hours since she last slept. 71. Maybe 73 if she counted the 20-minute nap in her office chair that had ended with her assistant knocking. The face in the mirror looked like a stranger's. Dark circles that concealer couldn't quite hide. A tightness around the mouth that came from clenching teeth through endless meetings. Eyes that had forgotten how to close long enough for rest to find them. She had started the sleeping pills 2 months ago, just temporarily, just until the custody hearing passed and Marcus stopped sending his lawyers like attack dogs. Just until the quarterly earnings report proved the skeptics wrong. Just until she could breathe again. Temporary had a way of becoming permanent when you weren't looking. The pills sat in her medicine cabinet in 3 different bottles. The original prescription from her doctor. A stronger version from a specialist she had seen exactly once. A third option obtained through channels she preferred not to examine too closely. Tonight she had taken one of each. The combinations sometimes worked better. Sometimes they didn't work at all. Tonight felt like the latter. Her phone buzzed on the marble countertop. Marcus's lawyer again. She silenced it without reading the message. Whatever new threat they had manufactured could wait until morning. Oliver was asleep down the hall and in his room. She had checked on him twice already, standing in his doorway and watching the steady rise and fall of his chest under the comforter. 9 years old and already showing signs of withdrawing from her. He spoke less at dinner, made eye contact less frequently, answered her questions about school with shrugs and monosyllables. Marcus's poison was working. Her ex-husband had found a new wife. Younger, warmer, the kind of woman who volunteered at school fundraisers and remembered teachers' names. The kind of mother Marcus's lawyers argued that Oliver needed. Stable, present, not drowning in work and medication while the empire crumbled. Aurora had built Whitlock Industries from her father's modest technology consulting firm into a powerhouse worth $3.7 billion. She employed 8,000 people across 14 countries. Her name appeared on lists of most influential women in business. Her face graced magazine covers with headlines about breaking glass ceilings and redefining leadership. None of it mattered if she lost Oliver. She left the bathroom and moved through her penthouse to the home office she had carved from what was supposed to be a guest room. Files covered every surface, legal documents outlining visitation schedules and parenting evaluations, financial statements that proved she could provide, character references from colleagues who had never seen her cry. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks from Monday. Her lawyer had called it a formality. Marcus had no real case. But Aurora had learned that reality mattered less than perception, and perception was a weapon her ex-husband wielded with precision. She needed sleep, real sleep, the kind that erased the tremor in her hands and the fog in her thoughts. Tomorrow she had a board meeting. Next week, the quarterly earnings call. The week after that, a product launch that would determine whether the company's stock price rose or plummeted. Aurora opened her laptop and began reviewing the presentation for tomorrow's meeting. Slide 47 needed revision. The revenue projections looked weak. Richard Davenport would notice. He always noticed anything that could be spun into weakness. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen. A text from her assistant board requested private session before tomorrow's meeting. R. Davenport leading, agenda not disclosed. The message landed in her stomach like cold stone. Private sessions meant coup attempts. Richard had been positioning himself for months, subtle moves that looked like concern for the company's direction, but smelled like ambition. She typed back, acknowledged. Then she took another pill. The night stretched ahead like an enemy to be defeated. Aurora returned to the presentation, then to the legal documents, then to the emails that had accumulated since she last checked 2 hours ago. At some point she made coffee. At another point she realized the coffee had gone cold. Her calendar showed meetings stacked back to back for the next 6 days. Product reviews and strategic planning and investor relations and damage control with a board member who had leaked concerns to the Wall Street Journal. Somewhere in the margins, she had penciled in Oliver's soccer game on Saturday. She had missed the last 3. He had stopped asking if she would come. The thought of losing him felt like drowning in open air. Aurora finished the presentation around midnight. Good enough. Not perfect, but adequate. The board would pick it apart regardless. Let them. She had survived worse. She stood from her desk intending to check on Oliver one more time before attempting sleep. The room tilted. Her vision blurred at the edges. She reached for the desk to steady herself and missed. The floor came up fast. Consciousness became a gray space where time moved strangely. She was on the ground. She was trying to stand. Her body refused commands. Someone was speaking, but the words came from underwater. Then darkness swallowed everything. The paramedics cleared Aurora to refuse transport after checking her vitals and asking questions about medications and medical history. She answered with the precision of someone used to hostile interrogations. Yes, she had taken sleeping aids. No, she had not exceeded prescribed dosage. No, she had no history of substance abuse or mental health crisis. All lies spoken with the confidence of absolute truth. Ethan stood near the office door while they worked, staying out of the way but unable to all leave. Something about her first words to him, about the fear in her voice when she asked about her son. When the paramedics packed their equipment and departed with instructions to follow up with her primary physician, Aurora finally looked at him directly. She had regained color in her face. Her posture had straightened into something that suggested control, though her hands still trembled slightly when she reached for the water bottle one of the paramedics had left. She studied him with eyes that cataloged and calculated. You work here. Not a question. A statement delivered without inflection. Ethan nodded. Night custodial. 3rd shift. This floor isn't part of standard custodial rounds. I heard something. I came to check. Aurora's gaze sharpened. What exactly did you hear? He chose his words carefully, aware that truth could be weaponized. A sound like someone falling. Then again, I thought someone might need help. And you decided to enter a restricted floor. I decided someone might be hurt. Silence settled between them. Aurora's fingers tightened around the water bottle. Her eyes flicked to the prescription bottles still visible on her desk, then back to Ethan. She stood, movements controlled despite the pallor still visible in her complexion. I appreciate your concern, but as you can see, I'm fine. This was a private medical matter that's now resolved. Translation: leave. Forget what you saw. Keep your mouth shut. Ethan understood dismissal when he heard it. He moved toward the door, then stopped. The words she had spoken, while barely conscious, echoed in his memory. Not a request. A plea. He turned back. Your son, Oliver. You asked me not to let them take him. Aurora's carefully constructed composure cracked. Just for a moment. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her hand rose as if to ward off the statement, then fell back to her side. She recovered quickly. I don't know what I said. I wasn't fully conscious. You were scared. That's not your concern. Ethan held her gaze. You're right, it's not. But I'm a parent too. I know what it sounds like when someone's afraid of losing their kid. Something shifted in Aurora's expression. Not softening exactly, more like recognition of another player on a board she thought she controlled. She moved to the windows, putting distance between them while organizing her thoughts. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. I'm dealing with a custody matter. My ex-husband has concerns about my fitness as a parent. If word got out that I collapsed in my office at midnight, it would provide exactly the ammunition he needs. Ethan processed the implications. You want me to keep quiet. I'm asking you to respect my privacy. Because if I don't, your ex uses it against you. Aurora turned from the window. Her eyes held something new. Not threat, assessment, trying to determine if he was another person she needed to manage or neutralize. Ethan made the decision before he fully thought it through. I won't say anything, not my story to tell. Surprise flickered across her face. Just like that. Just like that. Most people would want something in return. He shrugged. I'm not most people. Aurora studied him for several long seconds. Ethan had the distinct impression of being X-rayed, every motive and intention examined for hidden agenda. Finally, she nodded. Thank you. The words came out stiff, as if she wasn't accustomed to speaking them. I should know your name. Ethan Cole. Ethan Cole. She repeated it like committing it to memory. I know who you are. Your name's on the building. The ghost of something that might have been humor touched the corner of her mouth. Then it vanished. You should return to your work. I'll make sure security knows your presence on this floor was authorized. Ethan accepted the dismissal and headed for the door. As he reached it, Aurora spoke again. Mr. Cole, he paused. You said you're a parent. How old is your child? 8, a boy, Liam. Aurora nodded slowly. Then you understand what it feels like to have something precious that the world seems determined to take away. The raw honesty in her voice caught him off guard. This wasn't the billionaire CEO. This was just someone exhausted and afraid. Someone who had run out of walls to hide behind. Ethan met her eyes. I understand. He left before either of them could say anything else. The service elevator carried him back to the 40th floor. His abandoned cleaning cart stood exactly where he had left it. The mop water had gone cold in its bucket. He finished the floor in mechanical silence, mind churning through what had happened. Aurora Whitlock had collapsed in her office at midnight. He had found her. She had begged him to protect her son. Now she was asking for his silence. Simple enough on the surface. But nothing felt simple about the fear he had seen in her eyes or the desperation in her voice when she mentioned the custody battle. Ethan knew about fighting to keep your child. He had fought hospitals when Sarah died, refusing to let them take Liam to some sterile nursery when the boy needed his father's arms. He had fought his own grief when it threatened to drown him in those first months, forcing himself to stay functional because Liam needed someone who could feed him and change him and hold him through the night. He had fought the school system when they suggested Liam needed special counseling for behavioral issues that turned out to be nothing more than a quiet kid processing loss. He had fought the judgmental stares of parents who whispered about single fathers and broken families. Fighting never stopped. You just got better at recognizing the battles worth choosing. His phone buzzed again as he emptied the last trash bin. His mother, everything okay? He texted back, fine. Home by 7, the rest of his shift passed in routine silence. By 6:30, he had clocked out and was riding the train back to his neighborhood on the south side. Dawn broke over the lake, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. The train car held its usual assortment of night shift workers heading home. Hospital staff still in scrubs. Factory workers with lunch pails. Security guards loosening ties. All of them ghosts in the city's machinery. Present but unseen. Essential but ignored. Ethan arrived home to find his apartment exactly as he left it. Small but clean. 2 bedrooms and a living room that doubled as dining area. Furniture acquired piece by piece from thrift stores and curb finds. Nothing matched. Everything functional. Liam was still asleep. Ethan stood in the doorway and watched him breathe the same ritual he had performed every morning for 8 years. The boy had Sarah's profile, her dark hair and sharp chin. Sometimes Ethan saw her so clearly in Liam's face it felt like she had never left. His mother emerged from her room already dressed despite the early hour. She moved slowly, arthritis making each step deliberate. But her mind remained sharp, her eyes still catching details Ethan tried to hide. She poured him coffee without asking. They sat at the kitchen table in companionable silence, broken only by the refrigerator's hum. Finally, she spoke. "You look tired. Long night." "They're all long nights." She studied him over her mug. "But this one's different. What happened?" Ethan considered how much to share. His mother had raised him to help people. She would approve of what he did, but she would also worry, her mind jumping immediately to job security and consequences. He opted for partial truth. "Found someone who needed help, made sure they got it." "And did you get yourself in trouble doing it?" "Don't know yet." She nodded, unsurprised. "That's your father in you, always rushing toward problems instead of away from them." His father had died when Ethan was 12. Heart attack on a construction site. Sudden and final. His mother had never remarried, choosing instead to pour everything into raising him alone. She understood single parenting in ways most people couldn't. She reached across the table and patted his hand. "Whatever it is, you did the right thing. You always do, even when it costs you." The words settled in his chest. He hoped she was right. Liam appeared in the kitchen doorway an hour later, hair sticking up at impossible angles, still in pajamas covered with cartoon dinosaurs. He climbed into Ethan's lap without speaking, a morning ritual they had never discussed, but both needed. Ethan held his son and felt the weight of responsibility that never lightened. This small person depended on him completely. Every decision Ethan made rippled forward into Liam's future. Every risk carried consequences beyond his own life. He thought about Aurora's words, about having something precious the world seemed determined to take away, about fighting battles that never really ended. He thought about the fear in her voice when she mentioned her son, and he thought about the silence she had requested, the secret he now carried. Some secrets were worth keeping. Even when they felt like carrying stones, Aurora spent Friday in meetings that blurred together into a single marathon of defending decisions and deflecting attacks. The board session Richard had requested turned out to be preliminary positioning for the quarterly review. He raised concerns about recent acquisitions. She countered with projected returns. He questioned her strategic vision. She outlined market analysis that invalidated his objections. By noon, she had won the immediate battle. By 3, she recognized she was losing the larger war. Richard wasn't working alone. 3 other board members had aligned with him, forming a bloc large enough to challenge her authority if they moved in concert. The questions they raised sounded like concern, but carried the weight of coordinated strategy. After the last meeting ended, Aurora's assistant handed her a schedule for the following week. More meetings, more defenses to mount. And on Thursday, a deposition for the custody case where Marcus's lawyers would ask about her work hours and parenting presence, and anything else they could weaponize. She returned to her office and closed the door. The prescription bottles still sat on her desk where the paramedics had left them. Evidence of weakness. Proof of the instability Marcus claimed to fear. Aurora swept them into her desk drawer and locked it. Her phone showed 7 missed calls from her lawyer. She returned the call and listened to his summary of Marcus's latest motion. They wanted to introduce evidence of her work schedule, emails sent at 3 in the morning, missed school events, late arrivals to Oliver's activities. None of it illegal, all of it damning. Her lawyer's voice carried carefully modulated concern. "Aurora, I need to ask, is there anything else they might find? Anything you haven't told me?" She thought about last night, about collapsing on her office floor, about the janitor who found her and the paramedics who asked questions she had deflected. She lied cleanly. Nothing. After the call ended, Aurora sat in her office and watched Chicago move through its Friday evening routine. Workers streaming toward train stations, families heading to restaurants, people living normal lives that didn't require armor to survive. She had chosen this path, built this empire, sacrificed everything soft in pursuit of something permanent. Now permanence felt like sand slipping through her fingers while she watched helplessly. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Her head of security, a former police detective named Martinez, who had worked for the company 8 years, entered with his tablet in the expression that meant complications. He got straight to business. "We had an unauthorized access incident last night. Service elevator to the 41st floor. Single individual male entered at 12:04 and exited at 12:37. Aurora kept her face neutral. Did you identify him? Ethan Cole, night custodial staff. 3 years with the company. No prior security issues. Martinez swiped his tablet. Security cameras show him running toward the emergency stairs at 12:07. Cameras on 41 are limited, but we caught him entering your office. I'm aware. I authorized his presence. Martinez's eyebrows rose slightly. Ma'am, I had a situation that required assistance. Mr. Cole provided it. No further action needed. With respect, protocol requires incident reporting for unauthorized floor access. If Cole had legitimate business, it should have been logged. Aurora heard the subtext. Martinez wasn't questioning her authority. He was protecting his own liability. If something happened and he hadn't followed procedure, the responsibility fell on him. She made a decision that felt necessary but wrong. File the incident report. Include that I authorize his presence after the fact, but note the protocol violation. Have HR review his employment terms regarding restricted access. Martinez nodded and left. Aurora sat alone with the consequences of her choice. She had just thrown Ethan Cole under the bus after he had saved her life. Pragmatism required it. Self-preservation demanded it. But sitting in her office watching the city lights flicker on, she felt the weight of becoming exactly the person she had always sworn she wouldn't be. Someone who sacrificed others to protect herself. Ethan received the summons to HR on Monday morning. The email arrived at 7:43 while he was making Liam's breakfast. Generic corporate language about a routine review and confirmation of his availability for a meeting that afternoon. He knew routine when he saw it. This was anything but. He dropped Liam at school and returned home to change into the closest thing he owned to business casual. Khakis that were clean but worn. A button-down shirt Sarah had bought him years ago that still fit if he didn't breathe too deeply. Shoes that had seen better days but remained presentable if you didn't look too closely. His mother watched him from the kitchen doorway. What are you getting dressed up for? Meeting at work. What kind of meeting? He tied his shoes and stood. The kind where they decide if I still have a job. Her face tightened. Because you helped someone. Because I went where I wasn't supposed to go. She moved closer, her arthritic hands reaching for his shoulders. Ethan Michael Cole. You look at me. He met her eyes. She had the same expression she wore when he was 12 and came home with a black eye from defending a kid getting bullied. Pride mixed with exasperation mixed with love. She spoke slowly, each word deliberate. You did what you always do. You saw someone who needed help and you helped them. If they punish you for that, then they're not people worth working for. They're people who pay the rent. There's always other jobs, not ones that let me be home when Liam wakes up. She had no answer to that. They both knew the truth. Night custodial work paid better than day shift and offered the flexibility he needed as a single parent. Losing it meant scrambling for alternatives that might not exist. Ethan kissed her forehead. It'll be fine. They probably just want to document what happened. He didn't believe it. Neither did she. But sometimes hope required lying to yourself. The HR office occupied the 15th floor. Ethan had never been there before. He checked in with a receptionist who barely looked at him and was directed to wait in a conference room with walls made of frosted glass and furniture that cost more than his monthly rent. The woman who entered 20 minutes later carried a tablet and wore the professional smile of someone delivering bad news with corporate efficiency. She introduced herself as Jennifer Marks, Director of Human Resources. She sat across from him and launched into a script about company policy and security protocols. Ethan listened without interrupting. The summary was simple. He had violated restricted access protocols. Security had documented the incident. HR was conducting a review to determine appropriate action. Jennifer's voice maintained its pleasant neutrality. The concern, Mr. Cole, is that unauthorized access to executive floors represents a security risk. Even with good intentions, the protocol exists for everyone's protection. Translation. You're being punished for saving someone's life because bureaucracy matters more than humanity. Ethan chose his words carefully. I heard what I thought was someone in distress. I responded. So, Whitlock has confirmed that my presence was needed. Ms. Whitlock authorized your presence after the fact. but initial access was unauthorized. Jennifer tapped her tablet. We're not suggesting you had malicious intent, but we need to ensure all staff understand and follow established protocols. What happens now? We're reassigning you from the executive floor rotation. You'll continue with floors 20 through 35. Same hours, same pay grade. This is a precautionary measure, not a disciplinary action. Ethan felt the blow land. Floors 20 through 35 paid less per hour than the executive rotation. The difference would be $60 to $80 per week. Not catastrophic. Just one more way the margins tightened while pretending everything was fine. He kept his voice level. Understood. Jennifer stood signaling the meeting's end. We value your dedication to the company, Mr. Cole. This is simply about ensuring everyone operates within their designated responsibilities. She left him in the conference room with its expensive furniture and its view of the city where people like him existed as footnotes in other people's stories. Ethan rode the elevator down to the lobby and walked out into afternoon sunlight that felt too bright. His hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, from the slow-burning anger that came from being reminded of his place. He had saved Aurora Whitlock's life. She had thanked him with words and punished him with action. The world made its rules clear. Stay in your lane. Don't reach beyond your station. Kindness was fine as long as it didn't inconvenience anyone who mattered. Ethan walked to the train station and rode home in silence. His mother asked how the meeting went. He told her fine, just paperwork. She didn't believe him, but knew better than to push. That night, he picked Liam up from after-school care and took him to the park. They played on the swings until dusk painted the sky orange and pink. Liam talked about his day, about the science project he was working on, about a girl in his class who was mean to everyone. Ethan listened and made appropriate responses while his mind churned through calculations. With reduced hours, he would need to find supplemental income. Weekend work, maybe. Or asking his mother to watch Liam for a second part-time job. More hours away from his son, more time missed, more sacrifice required. Liam's voice pulled him back. Dad, are you listening? Ethan focused on his boy's face. Sorry, buddy. What did you say? I asked if you're okay. You seem sad. The observation landed with the weight of parental failure. He was supposed to shield Liam from adult concerns. Instead, his 8-year-old was reading his emotional state and worrying. Ethan pulled Liam close. I'm okay, just thinking about boring work stuff. Do you like your job? The question caught him unprepared. He considered lying, considered explaining the difference between liking something and needing it, considered all the complicated truths about survival and compromise. Instead, he said, I like that it lets me be here with you. That's the important part. Liam seemed satisfied with the answer. They stayed at the park until full dark, then walked home hand in hand. Some days that was enough. Being present even when everything else felt like falling apart. Aurora saw Ethan 3 days later in the lobby. Pure chance. She was leaving for a lunch meeting with investors while he was arriving for what she assumed was a day shift. Their eyes met across the crowded space. She watched him make a decision. He could acknowledge her. He could ignore her. He could do any number of things that would establish parameters for how they interacted going forward. He nodded once. Brief, polite, nothing more. Then he moved toward the service corridor and disappeared. Aurora stood in the lobby longer than necessary. Her assistant had already moved toward the car waiting outside. Investors were expecting her. Time was a commodity she couldn't waste. But something about that brief exchange left her unsettled. The way Ethan had looked at her. Not anger, not resentment, something worse. Disappointment. She had let HR do exactly what she knew they would do. Punish him for breaking protocol. Make an example. Establish boundaries. All the corporate mechanisms that protected people in power from consequences. Her lawyer had warned her about perception, about maintaining distance from anyone who could be weaponized in the custody battle. A janitor who had seen her at her weakest point represented risk. Better to create separation. Better to ensure he had reasons to keep quiet beyond simple decency. Better to sacrifice someone else's livelihood to protect her own interests. Aurora got into the car and tried to focus on the investor meeting. Revenue projections and market analysis and all the numbers that supposedly measured success. But her mind kept returning to that moment in the lobby. to the way Ethan had looked at her and seen exactly who she had chosen to be. Oliver asked about the janitor that night at dinner. The question came out of nowhere while Aurora was reviewing contracts on her tablet and barely tasting the meal her chef had prepared. Her son's voice cut through her distraction. "Mom, did you fire that man who helped you?" Aurora looked up. "What man?" "The janitor. The one who was there when you fell." Oliver's eyes held steady on hers. "Did you fire him?" The question landed like accusation. Aurora set down her tablet. "How do you know about that?" "I heard security talking. They said you fell and someone found you. Then I saw him in the building. He looked at me and I knew it was him." Aurora's mind raced through implications. What else had Oliver heard? What other details had filtered through security gossip and staff whispers? She chose her words carefully. "I didn't fire him. He's still employed by the company. There was just a reassignment for protocol reasons." What does that mean? It means sometimes people have to change which floors they work on. Oliver's expression suggested he understood exactly what that meant. "So you punished him for helping you?" "It's not that simple." "Seems simple to Mai." Her 9-year-old son's voice carried judgment she couldn't deflect. "He helped you and you hurt him." Aurora felt the words strike home. Out of the mouths of children came truths adults learned to rationalize away. She had spent years building armor against such simple moral clarity. Now her own son was dismantling it with observations she couldn't refute. She tried to explain. "Sometimes protecting one person means being careful about other people. It's complicated." "Is this about Dad trying to take me away?" The question froze her. "What makes you say that?" Oliver shrugged. "I hear you on the phone. I hear you crying sometimes when you think I'm asleep. I know Dad wants me to live with him and Karen." Aurora's throat tightened. She had tried so hard to shield him from the custody battle, to pretend everything was normal, to be the strong mother who had everything under control. Her son had been watching her fall apart the whole time. She reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm fighting to make sure we stay together. But that fight means I have to be very careful about everything. About who sees what. About what people might say. It's not fair to people like that janitor." "But I don't know what else to do." Oliver's fingers squeezed hers. "Maybe being careful about everything isn't the same as doing the right thing." The observation cut deeper than he could know. Aurora looked at her son and saw the person she used to be before life taught her that doing right often meant losing. She didn't have an answer, not one that would satisfy his moral clarity or her own conscience. They finished dinner in silence. Later, she tucked him into bed and stood in his doorway longer than usual, watching him sleep, terrified of the day someone might take him from her, terrified she was becoming someone he would grow to resent, terrified she was already too far gone to change course. The following week brought the quarterly earnings call. Aurora delivered numbers that exceeded analyst expectations and outlined strategic initiatives that projected confidence. The stock price rose 4% in after-hours trading. Business media praised her vision and leadership. Behind the scenes, Richard Davenport continued building his coalition. Quiet conversations with board members about succession planning, suggestions that perhaps Aurora's focus had drifted, whispers about her personal situation affecting judgment, politics disguised as concern, ambition wrapped in professional language. Aurora countered with her own moves. She reminded allies of her track record. She made promises about upcoming innovations. She positioned herself as irreplaceable while knowing that everyone could be replaced given sufficient motivation. The game exhausted her. Some mornings she woke up and couldn't remember why she fought so hard to keep a position that demanded everything and returned so little. Then she would see Oliver and remember. This was his inheritance, his future, his security against a world that took more than it gave. Everything she endured was for him. Everything she sacrificed. Everything she became. She told herself that every night. Some nights she even believed it. Ethan settled into his new rotation without complaint. Floors 20 through 35 offered their own rhythms. Different offices, different people working late. Different conversations overheard while emptying trash bins and mopping hallways. The pay difference hurt more than he admitted. $67 less per week turned out to matter significantly when margins were already tight. He cut corners where possible. Store brand groceries instead of name brands. Skipped the occasional coffee run. put off replacing Liam's shoes for another month. His mother noticed but didn't comment. She started cooking larger dinners so leftovers would stretch further. Small acts of assistance that came without judgment or I told you so. Liam remained oblivious to the financial calculus. His world consisted of school and soccer and the upcoming birthday party he had been planning for weeks. He wanted to invite his entire class. 23 kids. Ethan did the math and felt his stomach tighten. Pizza and cake and party favors for 23 kids. Easily $300. More than they could spare. Less than his son deserved. Ethan started looking for weekend work. Restaurant shifts, delivery driving, anything that paid cash and didn't require specialized skills. The options were limited but not non-existent. He found a catering company that needed weekend event staff. The work was irregular, but when it came, it paid decently. It also meant less time with Liam. Saturday mornings became rushed affairs where he kissed his son goodbye before heading to set up tables and serve food at weddings or corporate events. The irony wasn't lost on him. He served champagne to people celebrating while his own life contracted into smaller and smaller spaces. But he didn't complain, didn't rage, didn't indulge in self-pity. Sarah had taught him that survival sometimes meant swallowing bitterness and moving forward anyway. Some nights he thought about Aurora Whitlock, about whether she ever considered the ripples her decisions created, about whether people like her understood what $67 per week meant to people like him. Probably not. The wealthy rarely did. Their worlds operated on different scales where money solved problems instead of creating them. He didn't hate her for it. Hatred required energy he needed elsewhere. Instead, he filed the experience away as another lesson learned. Help people when you can, but don't expect gratitude, and definitely don't expect them to consider your circumstances when making decisions that affect you. The world was what it was. You adapted or you drowned. 3 weeks after the incident, Ethan was finishing his shift when he noticed the boy, 9 or 10 years old, sitting alone in a waiting area on the 27th floor at nearly 1 in the morning. Dark hair, sharp features, expensive clothes that looked rumpled from hours of wear. The boy's eyes were red, not from injury, from crying. Ethan stopped his cart. "Hey, you okay?" The boy looked up. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by something more complicated. "You're him, the one who helped my mom." Understanding clicked into place. "You're Oliver." The boy nodded. Ethan glanced around the empty corridor. No adults visible. No explanation for why a 9-year-old was sitting alone in an office building in the middle of the night. He crouched to the boy's eye level. "What are you doing here so late?" Oliver's voice came out small. "Mom said there was a meeting, something important. She told me to wait here, but she's been gone forever and nobody will tell me anything." Ethan felt concern tighten his chest. "How long have you been waiting?" "I don't know. Hours. I fell asleep for a while." Oliver's eyes filled with tears. He tried to blink away. "Something's wrong. I know something's wrong." Ethan made a decision. "Stay here. I'm going to find out what's happening." "Promise you'll come back." The question carried weight beyond its simple words. This was a kid who had learned people disappeared, who had been left waiting too many times. Ethan met his eyes. "I promise." He left Oliver in the waiting area and moved through the building with purpose. The executive floors were technically outside his jurisdiction now, but a missing CEO and a scared kid erased bureaucratic boundaries. The lights were on in Aurora's office on 41. Ethan took the stairs rather than risk the elevator. When he reached her floor, he found something that made his pulse spike. The door to her office stood open. Inside, 2 men in suits rifled through file cabinets. Not security, not building staff, strangers. Ethan pulled out his phone and started recording. Captured their faces, their movements, the way they systematically went through Aurora's files as if they had every right to be there. One of them looked up and saw him. The man's expression shifted from concentration to calculation. He said something to his partner. Both men straightened. Ethan didn't wait for confrontation. He backed into the stairwell and descended as quickly as silence allowed. His heart hammered against his ribs. Whatever was happening, it wasn't legitimate building business. He found Martinez, the head of security, doing rounds on the 30th floor. The man's expression shifted when Ethan described what he had seen. Martinez immediately called for backup and headed upstairs. He told Ethan to return to his work and forget what he witnessed. Ethan ignored the instruction. He returned to Oliver, who sat exactly where he had been left, small and scared and trying to be brave. Ethan knelt beside him again. Your mom's dealing with some important business, but she's okay. I made sure the right people know what's happening. Oliver studied him with eyes that seemed far too old. Are you in trouble again because of helping? The question revealed how much the boy understood. Not just about this moment, but about the cost of assistance. Ethan managed a smile. Maybe, but some things are worth the trouble. Oliver's expression cracked. Tears spilled over despite his efforts to stop them. Nobody helps us. Everyone pretends they're nice, but then they all just... He couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Ethan understood. When you were drowning, you learned quickly who reached out hands and who stepped back to protect themselves. He pulled Oliver into a gentle hug. The boy resisted for half a second before collapsing against him, small shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs, all the fear and loneliness pouring out. Ethan held him and thought about Liam, about how his own son needed this same thing. Someone reliable, someone who showed up, someone who didn't disappear when things got complicated. He thought about Aurora Whitlock fighting alone to keep this boy, about the desperation in her voice when she had begged him not to let them take her son. He thought about the cost of helping people who couldn't help themselves. And he made a decision that would change everything. When Aurora finally appeared an hour later, her face was haggard and her clothes rumpled. She looked like someone who had been through an interrogation. Martinez walked beside her, speaking in low tones. She saw Oliver first. Then her eyes found Ethan. Something passed between them in that moment. Recognition. Understanding. The acknowledgement that circumstances had forced them back into each other's orbits, despite both their efforts at separation. Aurora moved toward her son. Oliver ran to her, and she caught him, holding him with an intensity that spoke to how close she had come to losing him. Over his head, her eyes met Ethan's again. This time what he saw wasn't calculation or suspicion. It was raw gratitude mixed with fear, mixed with something he couldn't quite name. She mouthed two words. Thank you, Ethan nodded once. Then he collected his cleaning cart and returned to his work. Behind him, Aurora Whitlock held her son and realized that the janitor she had tried to push away might be the only person in her world who actually saw her as human. The thought terrified her almost as much as losing Oliver. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone in her fight. And that small crack in her armor would prove to be either her salvation or her destruction. The security footage disappeared within 48 hours. Martinez confirmed as much when Ethan asked about the investigation into the unauthorized office access. The head of security's face carried the neutral expression of someone delivering news he didn't fully believe himself. They stood near the loading dock where Ethan had just finished his break. Martinez shifted his weight, choosing words carefully. His voice stayed level, professional. The individuals you reported have been identified as consultants hired by the board for a routine audit. Their presence was authorized through proper channels. No criminal activity occurred. Ethan absorbed the lie without challenging it. He had seen their faces, watched them rifle through files with the systematic efficiency of people searching for specific ammunition. Nothing about their movements suggested routine or authorized, but arguing wouldn't change the official story. It never did when Power wrote the narrative. Martinez seemed to read his thoughts. The older man's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy. Sometimes things look different depending on where you're standing. From where I stand, you did the right thing reporting what you saw. What happens after that? He shrugged. Above my pay grade. The unspoken message came through clearly. Drop it. Move on. Don't make waves that could drown you. Ethan returned to his cart and his shift. The building's rhythm continued unchanged. Executives worked late. Security made rounds. The city glowed beyond the windows. Everything precisely as it had been before. Except Aurora Whitlock now knew someone on the board wanted her gone badly enough to hire people to search her private office. And Ethan had evidence on his phone that contradicted the official story. 3 nights passed before he saw her again. The building stayed unusually busy during those shifts, more security presence than normal. Unfamiliar faces conducting what they called random safety inspections that felt like systematic searching. Ethan kept his head down and his phone locked. Whatever corporate war was unfolding above his station's survival meant staying invisible. But invisibility had limits. He found the terrace by accident during his fourth year working nights. A maintenance door on the 38th floor that opened onto a narrow strip of concrete jutting from the building's eastern face. Someone had installed a metal railing and a single bench. Nothing else. Just open air and the city sprawling below. The space wasn't secret exactly, just forgotten. Too small for corporate events. Too exposed for the executive crowd who preferred climate-controlled luxury. Perfect for someone who needed to breathe without walls closing in. Ethan had started coming here during his breaks. 15 minutes of cold air and silence that helped reset his mind when the emptiness of night shifts became suffocating. He told no one about it. Some sanctuaries needed protection through anonymity. So when he pushed through the maintenance door at 1:17 in the morning and found Aurora Whitlock standing at the railing, his first instinct was to retreat. She turned before he could. Her eyes registered surprise followed by recognition, followed by something more complicated. She wore slacks and a silk blouse despite the hour. Work clothes that suggested she had never gone home. Her hair was pulled back in a style that had probably looked professional 12 hours ago, but now just looked exhausted. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. The wind filled the space between them, carrying the distant sound of traffic and the particular emptiness cities made after midnight. Finally, Aurora gestured at the bench. "I won't tell if you won't." Ethan stepped fully onto the terrace and let the door close behind him. He moved to the railing, maintaining distance while respecting that she had been here first. The view stretched endlessly. Lake Michigan disappeared into darkness on one side. The city grid extended until lights became pinpricks. From this height, individual lives became abstract, just patterns of movement and light signifying nothing. Aurora's voice cut through the wind. "I come here when I can't sleep, which is most nights lately." Ethan sipped from his travel mug, coffee gone lukewarm but still containing enough caffeine to matter. He had learned long ago that engaging powerful people required careful calibration. Say too much and risk overstepping. Say too little and seem insubordinate. He settled for honesty. "Me too, the quiet helps." She turned slightly, studying his profile. "How long have you known about this place?" 3 years, give or take. Something that might have been amusement touched her expression. "I've been coming here for 5. I thought I was the only one." The coincidence of their shared sanctuary hung between them. Two people occupying the same forgotten space, invisible to each other until circumstances forced collision. Aurora wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. "Martinez told me you reported what you saw in my office. The men searching through my files." Ethan nodded but didn't elaborate. Let her lead the conversation. Let her decide how much to share. She continued, her voice carrying an edge that could have been anger or exhaustion or both. "The official story is they were conducting a board-authorized audit. Convenient, isn't it? How reality becomes whatever the powerful say it is." He heard the bitterness. Recognize it as the sound of someone discovering that rules only applied in one direction. That protection was conditional on maintaining favor with people who had none. She turned to face him fully. "I know you don't believe the official story. I don't either. But proving it requires resources I can't spare right now. So instead, I have to smile and pretend I'm grateful for the board's thorough oversight." Ethan understood the position. When you were drowning, you couldn't afford to fight every battle. You saved energy for the fights that determined survival. He kept his voice neutral. "What were they looking for?" Aurora laughed without humor. "Anything they could use. Evidence of instability, poor judgment, anything to build a case that I'm not fit to lead this company." She moved to the bench and sat, her posture suggesting surrender to exhaustion rather than relaxation. "There's going to be a board meeting, a formal review of my capacity to continue as CEO. Richard Davenport is leading it. He'll use anything he found in those files to paint me as someone who can't handle the pressure." Ethan processed the information. Corporate politics were foreign territory, but power struggles looked the same regardless of setting. Someone wanted her gone. That someone had resources and strategy. Aurora was fighting uphill against an enemy who knew exactly which weapons would cut deepest. He moved to the bench but didn't sit. "What about the custody case? Does Marcus know about the board situation?" Her head snapped up. How do you know about Marcus? Ethan chose his words carefully. Oliver mentioned his father, and you asked me not to let them take your son. Doesn't take much to connect those dots. Aurora's jaw tightened. For a moment, he thought she might dismiss him, reassert the boundaries between their positions. Instead, she seemed to deflate slightly. Her voice came out quieter. Marcus's lawyers are very good at finding pressure points. If they learn about the board review, they'll use it. Argue that I'm so overwhelmed professionally that I can't possibly be an adequate parent. She met his eyes directly. That's why I had to create distance between us. Why HR reassigned you. I couldn't have anyone point to questionable associations or judgment calls. Everything has to appear perfect, controlled, exactly what a fit parent looks like. The explanation landed with the weight of truth, not justification exactly. Just context for choices made under pressure that left casualties in their wake. Ethan sat on the opposite end of the bench. You could have explained that at the time. She nodded slowly. I could have, but explaining requires trusting that the other person will understand, that they won't use the information against you somehow. She paused. I've been playing defense for so long I forget how to do anything else. The admission surprised him with its honesty. This wasn't the polished CEO who commanded boardrooms. This was someone stripped down to exhaustion and fear. Someone who had armored herself so thoroughly that taking it off felt impossible, even when she wanted to. They sat in silence while the wind moved between them. Ethan thought about his own defenses, the walls he had built after Sarah died, the careful distance he maintained from people who might expect emotional availability he couldn't provide, the way grief had taught him that vulnerability led to devastation. Aurora and he were more similar than their circumstances suggested, both fighting alone, both terrified of losing what mattered most, both so accustomed to survival that connection felt like weakness. Finally, he spoke. What keeps you awake besides the board in the custody case? She considered the question like it was a trap. Then something in her posture softened slightly. The fear that I'm failing Oliver, that he'll grow up resenting me for choosing work over presence, that he'll look back and see someone who was never really there. The words came out raw, unpolished by corporate training or public relations coaching. Just a mother's deepest fear spoken aloud in the dark. Ethan nodded, understanding. I worry about the same thing with Liam, that I'm asking him to carry too much too young, that he'll remember me as someone always tired, always stressed, never quite present, even when I'm in the room. Aurora turned to look at him, really look at him. Not the way she had before, calculating risk and potential exposure. This time seeing him as someone traveling parallel paths through different terrain. Her voice held genuine curiosity. How do you do it, balance everything when there's never enough of you to go around? Ethan thought about the question. About the nights he fell asleep putting Liam to bed because exhaustion won. About the birthday parties thrown together last minute because planning ahead required bandwidth he didn't have. About the constant guilt that seemed to define single parenting. He took a breath before answering. I stopped trying to balance. Balance implies some equilibrium as possible. I just prioritize each moment as it comes and try not to hate myself too much for everything falling short. Aurora absorbed his words. That sounds exhausting. It is, but the alternative is paralysis. So you keep moving and hope the forward momentum counts for something. They fell into comfortable silence again. The city noise provided soundtrack, distant sirens, the rumble of late-night trains, wind moving through concrete canyons, sounds of life continuing, regardless of individual struggles. Aurora spoke again, her voice thoughtful. Oliver asked about you after that night when you stayed with him. He wanted to know if you were my friend. Ethan waited for her to continue. She picked at a thread on her sleeve. I didn't know how to answer. I don't have friends anymore. Just employees and board members and lawyers and people who want something from me. She paused. You're the first person in years who helped without calculating return on investment. The statement hung between them. Not quite a question, but close enough. Ethan considered his response. I'm not looking for friendship or anything else. But if you need someone who'll shoot straight instead of managing you, I can do that. Aurora studied his face as if searching for hidden agenda. Finding none seemed to unsettle her more than discovering one might have. She stood abruptly. I should go. Oliver will wake up in a few hours and I try to be there for breakfast when I can. Ethan stood as well. For what it's worth, he seems like a good kid. Whatever you're doing, some of it's working. Something flickered in her expression. Gratitude mixed with pain. Thank you for saying that. She moved toward the door, then paused. Mr. Cole, Ethan, when the board meeting happens, if they ask you about that night I collapsed, what will you say? He met her eyes directly. The truth, that you were overwhelmed and exhausted, not unstable, that you were worried about your son, not delusional, that you were human, which last I checked isn't a disqualifying condition. Aurora held his gaze for a long moment. They'll twist it anyway. Probably, but that's on them, not me. She nodded slowly, then disappeared through the maintenance door. Ethan remained on the terrace for a while longer. The conversation replayed in his mind, each exchange revealing layers he hadn't expected. Aurora Whitlock was fighting battles on multiple fronts with resources that weren't infinite. She had made calculations that hurt him, but maybe made sense from her perspective. Understanding didn't erase the consequences, but it complicated an anger he might have held on to otherwise. He returned to his shift with the strange feeling that something fundamental had shifted. What that meant remained unclear. The board meeting convened on a Thursday morning at 10 sharp. Aurora had spent 3 days preparing, reviewing every decision made in the past year, anticipating every attack angle Richard might employ. Her lawyer sat beside her as they entered the conference room. The board members were already assembled. 12 faces arranged around the table with expressions ranging from concern to calculated neutrality to barely concealed anticipation. Richard Davenport occupied the chairman's seat at the head of the table. 63 years old with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. He had joined the board 8 years ago, recruited by Aurora herself when she needed someone with deep connections in the financial sector. She had learned too late that recruiting based on connections meant inviting people who valued networks over loyalty. Richard opened with pleasantries. Thanks for everyone's time. Acknowledgement that difficult conversations required courage. Framing that positioned what came next as painful necessity rather than calculated attack. Aurora recognized the strategy immediately. Make this about concern rather than ambition, about protecting the company rather than seizing control. He launched into his prepared statement. Recent concerns had emerged about Aurora's leadership stability. Board members had noted erratic decision-making, missed meetings, unusual behavior. The responsible course was formal review before problems escalated. Aurora kept her expression neutral while her mind cataloged each claim. Missed meetings, one rescheduled due to Oliver's school emergency. Erratic decisions, strategic pivots Richard had disagreed with that proved profitable. Unusual behavior code for the night she collapsed that someone had leaked despite confidentiality. Richard continued, his tone carrying false regret. We've received reports of an incident where you were found unconscious in your office at midnight. Reports of medication misuse. Reports of, he paused for effect, concerning statements about custody disputes affecting your judgment. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Aurora felt every eye on her, waiting to see how she would respond. Show emotion and confirm instability. Stay cold and confirm lack of humanity. There was no winning move in this game. She kept her voice level, professional. I experienced exhaustion-related dizziness resulting from extended work hours. The medication reference was prescribed sleep aids taken as directed. The custody matter is personal and has no bearing on my professional performance. Richard leaned forward slightly. But isn't that the concern, that you're pushing yourself beyond sustainable limits? That personal matters are creating pressure that manifests professionally? Helen Mercer, a board member who had allied with Richard, added her voice. Aurora, no one doubts your dedication. But perhaps that dedication has become unhealthy. Perhaps stepping back temporarily would benefit both you and the company. The trap closed around her. They weren't arguing she was incompetent. They were arguing she cared too much, worked too hard, sacrificed too much, weaponizing her strengths as evidence of weakness. Aurora's lawyer interjected with legal language about due process and documentation requirements. The board had obligations to follow proper procedures. Any action against Aurora would require substantive proof of actual harm to company interests. Richard smiled thinly. Which is why we're having this formal review, to ensure everything is documented appropriately. The meeting stretched for 2 hours. Each board member weighed in. Some defended Aurora with lukewarm support that felt worse than opposition. Others raised questions designed to sound reasonable while planting doubt. Through it all, Aurora maintained composure. She answered every question, provided context for every decision, refused to show the fear churning in her stomach. But when Richard mentioned the janitor who had unauthorized access to sensitive areas and private interactions with the CEO, Aurora felt something crack in her careful control. Her voice came out sharper than intended. Mr. Cole responded to a medical emergency. His presence was necessary and appropriate. Suggesting otherwise is deliberately misleading. Richard raised his hands in mock surrender. I'm simply noting that your judgment regarding who to trust in vulnerable moments might reflect the very pressures we're discussing. The implication landed clearly. She had relied on someone inappropriate, shown weakness to someone unsuitable, made choices that reflected clouded thinking. Aurora wanted to scream that Ethan had shown more integrity than anyone in this room, that he had helped without agenda while they circled like carrion birds. But screaming would prove their point, so she said nothing. The meeting ended without formal action. The board would continue monitoring the situation. Aurora would provide weekly updates on her health and decision-making processes. Everything would be documented. Translation. They were building a case, collecting ammunition, waiting for the moment weakness showed clearly enough to justify removal. Aurora returned to her office and closed the door. Her hands shook with suppressed rage and fear. She had survived worse. She would survive this. But the cost kept mounting while the path forward narrowed. Her assistant knocked 30 minutes later with news that Ethan Cole was in the building. He had asked to speak with her if she had time. Aurora's first instinct was refusal. Creating distance was the strategy. Every interaction risked providing more ammunition for enemies. But something in how Richard had weaponized Ethan's name made her angry in ways she couldn't quite articulate, as if acknowledging help from someone deemed inappropriate somehow discredited her completely. She told her assistant to send him up. Ethan arrived looking uncomfortable in business casual clothes that didn't quite fit. He stood near the door until she gestured him further in. His eyes took in the office, the expensive furniture, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the artifacts of wealth and power arranged just so. Aurora studied his expression. No envy, no resentment, just observation of a world foreign to his own. She spoke first. "What can I do for you, Mr. Cole?" He pulled out his phone and set it on her desk. "I still have the photos from that night. The men searching your office. Original files with timestamps and metadata. I thought you should know before anyone asks if they exist." Aurora looked at the phone, then at him. "Why tell me this?" "Because I'm guessing you're in a tight spot, and evidence might help." She wanted to accept it, use it, turn it into the weapon that could save her position. But accepting meant involving him further, creating a connection that her enemies would exploit. Her voice came out colder than intended. "I appreciate the offer, but I can't use information obtained through what technically was unauthorized access. It would create more problems than it solves." Ethan nodded slowly. "Understood." He reached for his phone, but she spoke again, words spilling out before she could stop them. "The board meeting today. They mentioned you, implied that I showed poor judgment trusting someone inappropriate to witness a vulnerable moment." Ethan's expression didn't change. "What does inappropriate mean in this context?" Aurora felt heat rise in her face. Shame mixed with anger at having to voice what had been implied. Someone outside the appropriate social and professional circles. Someone who might not understand the discretion required. Someone who... She trailed off. Ethan finished the sentence. "Someone who cleans floors for a living." The blunt statement hung between them. Aurora wanted to deny it but couldn't without lying. The unspoken class judgment had been clear. Ethan Cole didn't belong in her world. Relying on him suggested clouded thinking. She tried to explain. "It's not about worth. It's about optics, about what people perceive." Ethan cut her off. "I understand optics, Ms. Whitlock. I understand that me helping you looks wrong to people who measure value by income brackets. I understand that acknowledging basic human decency becomes a liability when it crosses certain lines. His voice stayed level, but something sharp edged each word. What I don't understand is why you're letting them make you complicit in that worldview. Aurora bristled. You don't know what I'm dealing with. The stakes involved. What I stand to lose if I don't play by certain rules. You're right. I don't know your specific situation, but I know something about playing by rules designed to keep you in your place. He picked up his phone. I also know that eventually you have to decide if winning on their terms is worth losing yourself in the process. The observation struck deeper than he could know. Aurora had been asking herself the same question for years. Each compromise had seemed necessary at the time, each sacrifice justified by what she was protecting. But the accumulation had transformed her into someone she barely recognized, someone willing to hurt people who helped her, someone so consumed with survival that compassion felt like weakness. She heard herself say words she didn't plan. They're going to use you against me, your presence that night, the reassignment, everything. They'll paint it as evidence of instability or poor judgment or whatever narrative serves them best. Ethan shrugged. Let them. I'll tell the truth if anyone asks. That's all I can control. The simplicity of his worldview felt almost naive, but Aurora envied it anyway. The luxury of living by principles when consequences stayed manageable. When losing didn't mean losing everything that mattered. She found herself explaining more than she should. The custody hearing is in 2 weeks. If I lose the board's confidence, Marcus's lawyers will use it to argue I'm not stable enough to parent. They'll take Oliver, and I'll have lost the only thing that actually matters while fighting to keep a position I'm not sure I even want anymore. The confession emerged before she could stop it. Raw admission of doubt she had never spoken aloud. Once said, the words hung in the air like evidence of the very instability her enemies claimed. Ethan's expression softened slightly. Sounds like you're fighting the wrong battle. Aurora's laugh came out bitter. You think I haven't considered that, but walking away means they win. Means I spent years building something only to surrender when it got hard. Or it means recognizing when the cost exceeds the value. There's a difference between quitting and choosing something better. She shook her head. Easy to say when you're not the one with everything on the line. His voice stayed quiet but carried weight. I lost my wife. I lost the life we planned together. I lost the person I thought I'd be. And I had to choose every day to keep showing up for my son even when I wanted to surrender completely. Don't tell me I don't understand high stakes. The rebuke landed with precision. Aurora had been so consumed with her own struggles that she had dismissed his as somehow less insignificant, as if pain respected income brackets. She met his eyes. You're right. I apologize. Ethan moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you're a better person than you're letting yourself be right now. The person who collapsed and first words were about protecting her son, that's who you are. The person treating me like a liability instead of someone who helped, that's who they're making you become. He left before she could respond. Aurora sat alone in her office as his words echoed. The truth in them felt like exposure she couldn't afford. She had become someone who calculated every interaction, who weaponized kindness, who let fear dictate choices until fear became indistinguishable from strategy. She had become exactly what Marcus had always accused her of being: cold, calculating, more comfortable with power than people. The realization should have devastated her. Instead, it just felt like confirmation of something she already knew. She returned to work because work was the only thing left that made sense. 3 days later, an article appeared in the Chicago Tribune's business section. The headline read, Leadership Questions at Whitlock Industries as Board Reviews CEO Performance. The piece cited unnamed sources describing concerns about Aurora Whitlock's recent behavior. Late-night office incidents, staff reassignments that suggested trust issues, board members worried about sustainability of current leadership approach. Nothing explicitly damaging, just implications stacked carefully enough to plant doubt. Aurora read the article 3 times looking for the leaked source. The language suggested someone with board access, probably Richard or one of his allies. Plausible deniability built into every statement. Her phone rang within minutes. Marcus's lawyer gleeful with false sympathy. They would be filing amended custody motions. Recent revelations about her professional stability raised serious concerns about her ability to provide appropriate parental supervision. The walls were closing in from every direction. That night, Aurora found herself on the terrace again. 1:30 in the morning, cold wind carrying lake moisture. The city spread below like promises it couldn't keep. Ethan was already there. He didn't seem surprised to see her. They stood in silence for a while before Aurora spoke. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen without trying to fix it." He nodded. She took a breath. "I'm losing. The board is building a case to force me out. Marcus is using everything that happens professionally to strengthen his custody claim. I'm fighting on multiple fronts with resources I don't have, and every move I make gets twisted into evidence against me." Her voice cracked slightly. "And the worst part is, I'm doing it to myself. I'm so focused on appearing strong and stable that I'm sacrificing everything genuine, including treating people with basic decency when they help me." She turned to face him. "I've been horrible to you. I know it. You know it. And I don't have a good excuse beyond fear. I'm terrified of losing Oliver, and that fear is making me into someone he won't even recognize when this is over." Ethan let the words settle before responding. "What do you actually want? Not what you think you should want, not what everyone expects. What do you actually want?" Aurora felt tears threatening. When was the last time anyone had asked that question? When was the last time she had let herself consider it honestly? Her answer came out as whisper. "I want to stop fighting. I want to sleep without pills. I want to have breakfast with my son without checking email. I want one moment where I'm not terrified of what I'm about to lose." She wiped her eyes, angry at herself for showing weakness. "But wanting doesn't change reality. I still have to fight the board. Still have to win the custody case. Still have to keep every plate spinning or watch them all shatter." Ethan's voice stayed gentle. "Maybe some plates need to shatter. Maybe you're holding on to things that aren't worth the cost of carrying them." Aurora shook her head. "I can't think like that. Not now, not when everything's on the line." They fell silent again. The wind moved between them. Somewhere in the distance, an ambulance siren wailed. Finally, Ethan spoke. "I'm putting in my resignation tomorrow. 2 weeks' notice effective immediately." The statement caught Aurora off guard. "Why?" "Because staying means watching you destroy yourself and pretending I don't see it. Because every time I'm in this building, I'm reminded that help gets punished and distance gets rewarded. Because my son asked me last week if I liked my job, and I couldn't give him an honest answer." He turned to face her. "But mostly because I can't be part of a system where helping someone makes me a liability in their eyes. You need to protect yourself. I understand that. But I need to protect my own integrity. And right now, those things are incompatible." Aurora felt something break inside her chest. Not dramatic, just a quiet cracking like ice giving way under pressure. She heard herself say, "I don't blame you." Ethan nodded. "I know." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "One last thing. When they come after you, and they will remember that the people trying to take you down are doing it because you're threatening their control, not because you're actually failing. The problem isn't you, it's them." Then he was gone. Aurora stood alone on the terrace and felt the full weight of isolation she had constructed. Every relationship transactional, every connection calculated for utility, every moment of genuine humanity treated as strategic error. She had built an empire and lost herself in the process. And the one person who had seen her clearly was walking away because staying meant becoming complicit in her self-destruction. The irony would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. Ethan's resignation letter sat on his supervisor's desk for less than 12 hours before HR called him in. Not to negotiate, not to counteroffer, just to confirm his final day and collect his building access credentials. The woman processing his exit paperwork barely looked at him. She had processed dozens of resignations, maybe hundreds. One more janitor leaving made no ripple in the corporate ocean. She handed him forms to sign: direct deposit termination, benefits cancellation, non-disclosure agreements that made him legally liable if he ever spoke about anything he witnessed during employment. Standard procedure presented as casual bureaucracy. Ethan signed everything without reading closely. The legal language was designed to intimidate people like him into silence. But he had already decided what truths were worth protecting and which institutions deserved loyalty. Whitlock Industries fell firmly in the latter category. His final shift came on a Tuesday. He worked his usual route through floors 20 through 35, emptying trash bins and mopping hallways for the last time. The building's rhythm continued unchanged. His presence or absence meant nothing to the machinery. Around midnight, he found himself drawn to the terrace one final time. The maintenance door opened with its familiar creak. Cold air hit his face, carrying the smell of impending rain. The space was empty. He hadn't expected Aurora to be there. She had her own battles to fight, and he had made his position clear. Their paths had intersected briefly by necessity and circumstance. Now they were diverging again towards separate horizons. Ethan stood at the railing and looked at Chicago sprawling below. Somewhere in that grid of lights was his apartment where Liam slept, his mother reading in her room, his small life that would continue regardless of corporate dramas playing out in the glass towers. He felt relief mixed with something more complicated. This building had been his livelihood for 3 years. Not a dream job, but stable income, predictable routine, the kind of work that let him focus energy on what mattered. Walking away meant uncertainty, job searching while bills accumulated, explaining to Liam why they might need to tighten budgets further, watching his mother's face try to hide worry about their situation. But staying meant compromising pieces of himself he couldn't afford to lose. The part that believed helping people mattered more than protecting institutional interests. The part that refused to treat human decency as strategic liability. Some prices were too high regardless of what you gained by paying them. He left the terrace and finished his final shift, clocked out at 6:47 in the morning. Rode the train home as dawn broke over the lake. Arrived to find Liam already awake eating cereal at the kitchen table while his grandmother packed his school lunch. His son looked up with milk on his upper lip. "Dad, are you really not working at the tower anymore?" Ethan had told him the previous night. Tried to frame it as positive change. New opportunities. Sometimes moving on was growth. All the parental platitudes that sounded hollow even as he spoke them. He sat down next to Liam. "Yeah, buddy. My last night was tonight." Liam's expression carried concern that 8-year-olds shouldn't need to feel. "Are we going to be okay?" The question landed heavy. His son had learned to worry about adult problems, to calculate household stability, to fear changes that might destabilize their precarious balance. Ethan pulled him close. "We're going to be fine. I promise. Sometimes you leave one job to find something better. It's not always bad." Liam nodded against his shoulder, but the tension didn't leave his small body. He had heard promises before. The world had taught him that adults couldn't always keep them, no matter how sincere they sounded. Ethan's mother caught his eye over Liam's head. Her expression held questions she wouldn't ask in front of the boy. Later they would talk. Later she would want full explanation. Later he would have to admit he had chosen principle over pragmatism and hope she understood. For now he just held his son and tried to believe his own reassurances. The formal board review was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Aurora spent the week preparing with her lawyer. They reviewed every decision from the past year, documented every success, built defenses for every choice that could be questioned. Her lawyer was confident. "They don't have grounds for removal. The company is performing well. Your leadership has been effective by every measurable standard." This is political theater. But Aurora understood that theater could be indistinguishable from reality when perception mattered more than fact. Richard didn't need legal grounds. He needed enough board members convinced that change was necessary. The business media continued running stories. Each one cited anonymous sources. Each one planted seeds of doubt. Aurora Whitlock's grip on power weakening. Board losing confidence. Potential leadership transition being discussed. Death by innuendo disguised as concern. Marcus's lawyers filed amended custody motions 3 days before the board review. They cited the media coverage, argued that professional instability indicated personal instability, requested emergency temporary custody pending full hearing. The judge denied the emergency request, but moved the full hearing up to the following week. Expedited timeline that left no room for careful preparation. Aurora was fighting fires on multiple fronts with gasoline instead of water. Oliver sensed the pressure even though she tried to hide it. He grew quieter at dinner, asked fewer questions, Spent more time in his room with the door closed. A 9-year-old withdrawing into protective shell against adult chaos he couldn't control. Thursday night, Aurora stood in his doorway watching him sleep. His face looked peaceful in ways he rarely achieved when awake. She wanted to give him that peace permanently. Wanted him to grow up without carrying her battles like inherited debt. But wanting couldn't reshape reality. The hearing would happen. The board would vote. Outcomes would arrive regardless of her desire to shield him. She returned to her home office and worked until 3 in the morning, reviewing documents, rehearsing responses, building armor that felt increasingly ineffective against attacks she couldn't fully see coming. Around 4, she finally tried to sleep, took a single prescribed pill, lay in darkness waiting for chemical peace that came slowly, if at all. Her phone buzzed at 7, her lawyer with bad news. Richard had filed additional documentation with the board, affidavits from staff members describing concerning behavior, late-night presence in the building, erratic schedule, unusual interactions with subordinate personnel, all technically true, all framed to suggest instability. Aurora felt the walls close another inch. She showered and dressed in her most professional suit, battle armor made of fabric and confidence she didn't fully feel. The board meeting began at 2. Attendees included all 12 board members, corporate counsel, and an independent mediator brought in to ensure procedural fairness. The mediator's presence suggested this was more than preliminary review. This was formal action with legal implications. Aurora took her seat with her lawyer beside her. Across the table, Richard Davenport arranged papers with deliberate casualness. The other board members settled into positions that revealed their loyalties through simple geography. Richard's allies clustered near him. Aurora's remaining supporters scattered and isolated. The uncommitted middle positioned themselves for maximum flexibility. The mediator opened with procedural overview. This was a formal review of CEO performance and capacity. Board members would present concerns. Aurora would respond. At meeting's conclusion, the board would vote on confidence. Simple majority could request her resignation. 2/3 could remove her outright. Richard presented his case methodically. He cited the incident in her office, the medication questions, the late-night work patterns that suggested inability to maintain boundaries, the staff reassignments that appeared retaliatory. He introduced affidavits from security personnel describing unusual behavior, from HR documenting the Ethan Cole situation, from board members expressing concern about recent decisions. Nothing explosive, just steady accumulation of suggestion that Aurora Whitlock was struggling under pressure she could no longer manage effectively. Aurora's lawyer countered with financial performance data, revenue growth, successful product launches, strategic initiatives that strengthened market position. Every measurable indicator showed effective leadership. But Richard had anticipated this defense. No one questions Aurora's past achievements. The concern is present capacity. Whether the pressures she's facing, professional and personal, have created situation where continued leadership puts the company at risk. Helen Mercer added, her voice with practiced sympathy. Aurora, we all admire your dedication, but dedication becomes concerning when it manifests as inability to recognize limitations. Perhaps taking a medical leave would allow you to address these pressures without the added stress of CEO responsibilities. The suggestion landed with velvet-wrapped steel. Medical leave meant diagnosis. Diagnosis meant evidence for Marcus's custody case. They were coordinating their attacks across fronts. Aurora kept her voice steady. I appreciate the concern, but I'm not experiencing any limitations that affect my ability to lead this company. I'm managing personal matters that are common for any parent going through custody disputes. That doesn't constitute grounds for removal. Richard leaned forward with false concern, but the accumulation of incidents suggests pattern. The late-night office presence, the collapse that required emergency services, the questionable judgment in whom to trust during vulnerable moments. There it was, the Ethan Cole situation weaponized as evidence. Aurora felt anger cut through fear. Mr. Cole responded appropriately to a medical emergency, suggesting that accepting help from someone deemed socially inappropriate somehow reflects poor judgment, says more about this board's values than my capacity to lead. The statement landed harder than intended. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Richard's expression tightened slightly. He recovered quickly. No one is suggesting class prejudice. We're noting that in moment of crisis, you relied on someone with no medical training rather than properly calling emergency services through standard channels. That decision-making raises questions. The trap closed neatly. Defend Ethan and prove poor judgment. Accept Richard's framing and abandon someone who helped her. Aurora's lawyer interjected with procedural objections. The board was exceeding its authority. Personal medical matters were protected. Removal required proof of actual harm to company interests. Richard conceded points while maintaining pressure, which is why we're voting on confidence rather than immediate removal. Aurora deserves opportunity to address concerns, but the board also has fiduciary duty to protect company interests. The meeting stretched toward 3 hours. Each board member spoke. Some defended Aurora with qualifications that undermined support. Others raised questions designed to sound thoughtful while planting doubt. Aurora answered everything while feeling foundation erode beneath her. She was losing, not dramatically, just steadily. Each exchange chipping away credibility until removal became inevitable conclusion. The mediator called a brief recess before final statements. Aurora stood on trembling legs and walked to the conference room windows. The city stretched below, indifferent to corporate warfare, playing out in glass boxes suspended above it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Oliver, "Mom. Where are you?" She texted back. "Important meeting. Home soon." His response came immediately. "Are you okay?" The question destroyed something inside her mind. Her 9-year-old son carrying her emotional with the wife, monitoring her status, afraid in ways children shouldn't need to be. She typed, "I'm fine, baby. I love you." The lie felt necessary and inadequate simultaneously. The meeting reconvened for final statements. Richard summarized his concerns with practiced gravitas. Aurora responded with facts about company performance. Both sides made their cases to the board members who would decide her fate. Then the mediator asked if any board members had additional questions before voting. Silence settled over the room. Aurora braced for verdicts she could feel forming. The conference room door opened. Oliver stood in the doorway. His face was pale but determined. Behind him, looking deeply uncomfortable but refusing to retreat, was Ethan Cole. Richard rose from his seat. "This is a closed meeting. How did you get up here?" Oliver ignored him. He walked straight toward the mediator with the confidence of someone who had decided consequences mattered less than action. His voice carried clearly despite his age. "I need to tell you something about my mom, about what really happened." The mediator looked uncertain. "Young man, this is a board meeting. It's not appropriate." Oliver cut her off. "My mom collapsed because she was working so hard trying to keep our family together. She wasn't being crazy or unstable. She was just really tired and scared because my dad is trying to take me away." The room held collective breath. Aurora felt her heart stop. Oliver wasn't supposed to know. Wasn't supposed to carry this. She had tried so hard to shield him. Her son continued, tears starting to form, but voice staying strong. And when she fell, this man helped her. He pointed at Ethan. He made sure she was okay. He called ambulance. He stayed until she was safe. That's not weird or wrong. That's just being a good person. Oliver turned to face the board directly. "You're mad at my mom because she accepted help from someone who's not rich. But that's stupid. He helped when she needed it. That makes him better than all of you." The 9-year-old's moral clarity hung in expensive air. Several board members looked away. Richard's face had gone carefully neutral. The mediator seemed uncertain how to proceed. Oliver moved to his mother and wrapped his arms around her waist. Aurora held him while trying not to fall apart completely. The mediator found her voice. "This is highly irregular. The child shouldn't be here." Ethan stepped forward. His discomfort was evident, but his presence commanded attention. "I apologize for the interruption. Oliver found me in the lobby. He was very insistent." Richard recovered his composure. "Mr. Cole, you are no longer employed here. Your presence is unauthorized. I'm calling security." Ethan nodded. "That's your right. But before you do, you should know I still have documentation from the night unauthorized personnel searched Ms. Whitlock's office. Photos with timestamps, faces clearly visible, evidence that contradicts your claim they were authorized auditors." The statement landed like grenade. Richard's face went rigid. Helen Mercer looked between Richard and Ethan with dawning understanding. One of the uncommitted board members spoke up. "What unauthorized personnel?" Ethan pulled out his phone. The men I witnessed rifling through Ms. Whitlock's files 3 weeks ago. I reported it to security. Head of security told me they were board-authorized auditors. But the photos suggest they were private investigators hired without proper disclosure to full board. He swiped through images, faces, file cabinets open, timestamps proving after-hours access, evidence that someone had been conducting unauthorized searches. Richard found his voice. Those were legitimate consultants hired through proper channels. Ethan met his eyes. Then you won't mind if I share these photos with corporate counsel for verification, and possibly local media outlets that have been running stories based on information those consultants might have found. The threat hung unspoken but clear. Ethan had evidence of impropriety. He was willing to use it. The mediator intervened. I think we need to pause this proceeding. There are allegations here that require investigation before any vote occurs. Richard tried to object. This is deflection. The matter at hand is Aurora's capacity to lead. But the uncommitted middle had shifted. Questions were forming. Doubt was spreading. The careful narrative Richard had constructed was cracking under unexpected pressure. One board member Aurora had thought lost spoke up. I move we table this review pending investigation into these allegations of unauthorized access and potential coordination with media leaks. Another seconded the motion. Richard could read the room. His power play was collapsing. This is inappropriate. We have duty to address these concerns about leadership. The mediator cut him off. Mr. Davenport, given new information suggesting potential procedural violations, I'm recommending we postpone this review. The board can vote to overrule my recommendation. Show of hands favored postponement. 8-4. Richard's coalition had fractured. The mediator declared the meeting suspended pending investigation. Board members filed out with varying expressions, some angry, some relieved, some simply confused about what had happened. Aurora stood holding Oliver while Ethan remained near the door, neither quite believing the turn events had taken. Richard stopped beside Ethan on his way out. His voice was low, dangerous. You just made a powerful enemy. Ethan's response was quiet but firm. I already had powerful enemies. At least now they're exposed. Richard left without responding. The conference room emptied until only Aurora, Oliver, Ethan, and her lawyer remained. The lawyer was already on his phone organizing next steps. Investigation protocols, documentation, damage control. Aurora released Oliver and moved toward Ethan. Her voice came out rough with suppressed emotion. You didn't have to do that. He shrugged. Kid was very convincing. Hard to say no to someone that determined. Oliver looked between them. Are you and Dad friends now? The question held innocent hope. Aurora felt tears threaten for different reasons. We're working on it. Ethan knelt to Oliver's level. You did something really brave today. Coming here. Speaking up. That took guts. Oliver's lower lip trembled. I heard security talking. They said Mom was going to lose today. I couldn't let that happen. Ethan pulled the boy into a brief hug. You're a good son. Your mom's lucky to have you. Aurora watched the exchange and felt something fundamental shift. This man who owed her nothing had risked retaliation to defend her. Her son had seen it, had recognized the kind of person worth believing in. She had been so focused on protecting Oliver from her battles that she forgot he was learning by watching how she fought them. What he had seen was someone trading humanity for survival, someone pushing away help out of fear. What he needed to see was someone accepting support, someone building connections, someone demonstrating that strength included vulnerability. Ethan stood and moved toward the door. I should go. You have things to handle. Aurora stopped him. Wait. He paused. She took a breath before speaking. I owe you apology, multiple apologies, for how I treated you after you helped me, for letting HR punish you, for treating you like liability instead of person who showed me extraordinary kindness. Her voice cracked slightly. You were right. I let fear make me complicit in a system I don't believe in. I sacrificed my own values to appease people who don't deserve that power. I'm sorry. Ethan nodded slowly. Apology accepted. I also need to tell you something. Aurora glanced at Oliver, then back to Ethan. The resignation you submitted, I'm asking HR to void it. I want you back, not as night custodial, as employee relations. Real position with real salary, if you're willing. Ethan looked startled. Why? Because you understand something most of executive staff doesn't. That people matter more than optics. That dignity isn't determined by pay grade. That integrity means something even when it costs you. She paused. And because I need people around me who will call me out when I'm becoming someone I don't want to be. Ethan considered carefully. That's a generous offer, but I need to think about it. Figure out if working here makes sense given everything that happened. Aurora nodded. Fair. Take time you need. Offer stands regardless. He left with Oliver watching him go like hero exiting scene. Aurora's lawyer finished his call and turned to her. We need to strategize. This investigation will take weeks. During that time, you're vulnerable. We need to shore up support and prepare for custody hearing. The hearing. Aurora had almost forgotten. Next week, Marcus would get his chance to paint her as unfit. The board situation bought her time but didn't solve the larger problem. She was still drowning, just in shallower water temporarily. Oliver tugged her sleeve. Mom, are you going to be okay? She looked down at her son and made a decision. Yeah, baby, I think I am. Maybe not the way I planned, but okay in ways that matter more. She didn't know if she believed it, but saying it felt like step towards something better than what she had been building.